I'm gonna pull the whole thing down. I'm gonna bring the whole fucking diseased, corrupt temple down on your head. It's gonna be biblical.
Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Patriots Across the Pond with me, Elisa V, and of course, my partner in crime here from across the pond, Stu from Stu's News. Today, we have an amazing guest. We have Derek Johnson, and I'm sure most of you who follow us have probably been following Derek for a pretty long time since he came on the scene. He has been the one that's credited with really educating and having people understand both in the US as well as abroad what the military world is all about in terms of what's really going on behind the scenes, what has been happening, what a lot of the military comms truly are, and where we are and where we're going. So, and so much more. So, not to mention that Derek is an amazing singer, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. But welcome, Derek. We're so honored to have you here.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah.
Well,
And of course, if I didn't mention in my little intro, of course, Derek is, he is a military person himself. So he served the United States, and we're very happy and honored and proud and thankful for that.
Yeah. So, Derek, I know you sort of came onto the scene, didn't you, when you did this video that went viral? I think that was your first video that you did. It's 90 minutes, isn't it? You just sat in your car and you talked to us all about military code and military law and those sort of things. And I think that video had such an amazing impact on people. And when Nino Rodriguez did that video of his talking about the trafficking around the pool, it had such an amazing effect that it really invigorated us all again, I think.
Well, I mean, I was at wit's end because of friends and family at that point. Because at that point in my life, I didn't have a lot of, my circle has always been small. But because my circle was small, naturally, when you have a small circle, your tensions are going to build a lot quicker and a lot faster when the people you're supposed to be able to trust the most won't even listen to you. And I've just always been the kind. My grandfather was the one that taught me guitar, and he was a World War II veteran, and he was just so open to life. He had his set values. He had his set principles, but he would let Jehovah's Witnesses come in the house and talk. He would let Mormons, Mennonite, whoever. We went to all different kinds of churches. He wanted to go see a Greek Orthodox Easter one time just to see it. And he's like, I just want to see it, And he always had this mentality that what if I get to the gate and I'm wrong? But if I get to the gate and I'm wrong, there may be a bunch of people there that I met along the way that would vouch for me, that I was open to hear where I was wrong and where they were correct, if it works that way. And he was a Native American. So that's the key to that. I try to tell people is that, my own family weren't even just willing to listen. So I know I talk a lot, but just shut up for a moment because I happen to know what's going on. This is the one place in life I know what's happening and you don't, so it's kind of like one of those where they had a lot of things that attributed in my life and I shut up and listened to them. And it was just one of those moments where I was just like so frustrated because none of those entities would just be quiet just for a moment and just have a conversation. So naturally, I went to Facebook and had a conversation with myself. It felt like for a moment there, but I think the rest is history.
Yeah, we all felt that way, that we didn't have a lot of people to talk to, and the people that were closest to us, really. So I started a little podcast in May 2020, and Elisa as well. She's been doing her stuff, so it's brilliant to get the information out.
Yeah, and we were talking just briefly, like this morning off camera, and we did a little on-camera rant that, for instance, you are talking about how things like these specific things. Well, we, as part of this movement, learned them from people like you and other people that were disseminating information and intel, etc., decodes. And so it's so frustrating when people say, at least that's what I get is, well, that's your opinion. And it's like, no, it's really not my opinion. There is hours and days and months of research and information that's come from people who are in the know, who know, 100 times more than I do. It's not an opinion. If you'd stop and let yourself listen, you might actually learn something and realize what the truth is.
Well, and I think the word truth and facts, those things have been so watered down that, but yeah, that's the biggest, you saying that. I mean, I was telling someone the other day that, that's what people are going to receive. At least those people are willing to say, well, that's your opinion. So that means they're listening. Maybe it plants a bug. At least they're not completely shutting the door. But you're correct on the terminology when it comes to that. It's like, it's not an opinion. It's like, that, and that's where I tell people in the US, like, a lot of Americans are grateful for military, but they just know the term military. Like, it's just like an in passing term. It's not, they don't know all the intricacies. And I'm like, you wonder why we sit around and get to have our funny stories with our brothers and sisters of what happened here and what happened here. And, someone got cussed out for doing this. And they get to, be the recipient of these funny stories that all of us went through the military to be able to contribute to a funny conversation. And I'm like, but that's the funny part. Let me show you the serious part of the military. Let me show you the laws and orders. Let me show you what the regiment looks like, the discipline, the structure. Without it, we wouldn't even have a separate topic of military. That's the whole point of military, is it is different. It is separate. It's a completely different lifestyle. And it's not an opinion at the end of the day, like I tell people. So I feel you on that. I mean, I still hear that. And I'm like, and you don't want to be like, I can't walk around and be like, do you know who I am? You can't do that, because then, you're up. But you want to, though, in a way of going, look, you can't be this, or you can't be whoever you are. You can't be a general, a colonel, or a lieutenant colonel without getting there through proper channels and regiment discipline structure. So it's the same thing with me. I didn't make it to those levels in the military, but I did retire, which is going to be interesting for a lot of veterans to figure out whenever I get to tell that story. I did fully retire. I didn't do 20 years and I fully retired through the Army. So I have quite a story back here that's going to be able to tell one day when it's not about me, but I'll be able to tell it and people will be more open to see why God put me where he put me. But it's not an opinion. None of this stuff is opinion. And if it were, then it would, again, we wouldn't have any regiment discipline structure to the military. And it would just be chaos for sure.
You know, I have a question that I don't know if anyone's ever asked you. They might have, but what there's so many people in the military, right? I know people in the military. They don't know the extent of knowledge, information, decodes, all that stuff that you do. What was inside you that made you decide that you needed to truly understand everything? Because I'm going to go out on a limb here, but you're not typical. You know, the time you've taken and the effort you've put in to understand and really know these things, and then, you know, of course, put you in a position to share them.
Well, I think we're in that's a product of the era, right? I'm from a different cloth because my dad was already almost 42 years old when he had me. And then my grandfather, his dad was born in 1912. So every one of my great grandparents were the 1870s, 1880s. Now, I didn't know, but one of my great grandparents, who was the only one born in the 1900s, but I'm a product of that kind of raising. I mean, just something as simple as a peach. If you threw a peach down on the ground, it would bruise it. Well, you got yelled at for that. You know, can you imagine a child throwing a peach down today? That people wouldn't even fathom that. Now, they weren't abusive to me. It was discipline and structure. It was a regiment. I already had a regiment in life. My grandfather, the other grandfather I was talking about, the Native American, he was one who loved reading, but he also loved regiment, discipline, structure of the military. And he loved all the strategies and tactics of the military. Such as that's why I am versed on the puppet government, the government exile, and those things. That's why I was able to see it, because in 1943-45 was the most popular puppet government up to this one with the Second Philippine Republic. Well, that's when my grandfather served in the army, and he just loved those tactics. He didn't love the war, but he loved the strategies and tactics, and he was always a proponent of, hey, war is your last option. The absolute battleground war, combat, those things. But, you know, in reality, every soldier should look like me in reality. But it's a product of the era, and it's a product of what President Eisenhower talked about with his military industrial complex speech. Now, he didn't go into great detail. He kind of couldn't at that moment because he only had a few minutes in his farewell speech. But that's what he was alluding to, was when military went to money and paying soldiers. Now, there's a difference in being paid and doing a job versus serving and then getting paid. And so many people cannot see the difference in that. And then the benefits, their privileges, their benefits, they're exactly what they say. You don't sign up for those. You sign to serve your nation, and then you're a recipient of thank you for your sacrifice. Here's your privileges for doing so. We have too many soldiers who, of course, they're going to raise their right hand. Of course, they're going to repeat the oath. Of course, they're going to say all the things they got to say to get in that service to be a recipient of those benefits. But they don't know a single word from a single sentence, from a single paragraph of anything of which they're serving under, the laws and the orders of the military and federal, much less what the actual oath says. But naturally, they're going to say that, and they're going to repeat it, because you have to do all those things to get in the military. And that's where our leaders, and I feel this is where it's going, because they're removing quite a few commanders. There's been over 300 high-level commanders relieved of duty since June 2017, a record number. And then what they got to do, and I know they're going to do it, is they're going to get in those service academies, because the president is the one who appoints the officers. That is straight up military code right there. So in military law, the president appoints those. So those military officers, which are your actual leaders, which most people who are military know the difference in an NCO and enlisted versus an officer and that chain of command. That's very important, because those are the ones who have the leadership. Those are the ones making the decisions. Those are the ones who have been sporadic. There's been a lot of good generals and a lot of good colonels and a lot of good lieutenant colonels, but there's been some in there that's created just enough along the way that there's been some dissent here and there, because when you're ranking up, that pyramid gets smaller the more you rank up. And every one of these guys that's trying to rank, they're fighting for those positions as well. So when money's involved, well, the higher you go up, the more money you make in retirement. So there's been people who will do what? Agendas. And they'll have people over here, congressmen and women, in generals' ears and colonels' ears, different people. If you'll do this a lot. So there's always been this battle along the way. And that's what President Trump is saying when he says, I'm rebuilding the military. He's not just talking about ammo and weapons and, equipment and all the other things, our aircraft. He's talking about that leadership all along the way. And then having a checks and balance back in there to where skill sets like me and different others who can identify, because these guys are good. They've been doing it so long that it takes a certain skill set to see if they're saying what they're saying, meaning what they're meaning, what are they doing to go up this ladder. And so, every soldier in reality should look like me. And what they're going to do is get in those service academies and make sure that our military laws and also federal are being taught the right way. All right. And then that's what they had to do. And they hadn't been doing that. And then also, if any of you have been to high school or college, you've seen students who sit there and they'll hear, but they don't listen, right? They're just doing enough to get by, to get that paper and get out. And, I got the paper. Well, that paper, if it don't tell us your GPA and what kind of student you were, well, is that the one you want operating on you? Some of the ones I saw when I was at the University of Alabama and Colorado State, I don't want them putting any kind of device on my body, because I know what they were doing out on Friday and Saturday night. So our colleges are the same way. They're partying week in and week out. They do just enough to pass the test and get their little piece of paper. People don't have that passion anymore to study and love and know what they know. So the military's been that, and they're cleaning that out. That's what President Trump's talking about.
Well, you certainly got the passion for it. And just going back to when we were talking about opinion and stuff, anyone that does say, that's an opinion. I've got two of Derek's books here. This is Midnight Rider, Rides Again. And this is absolutely jam-packed full of military protocols, uniforms, codes, all these sorts of things. And his second book, which is a monster, the information in here is outstanding. So Derek has put so much work into all this. That's brilliant for my reference library anyway. But so when when Trump came on the scene and we had this Q operation start, when did you really start understanding what was sort of going on behind the scenes, shall we say?
Well, when I got out of the military, I didn't want out. One, I fought like hell to stay in. And I had some key people I won't mention on the back side that I won't mention yet. So that there's a reason again why I retired and didn't do what the usual requirement is to retire. So a lot of times people hear the word retire, so it's like that word opinion, right? They hear retire and they go, "Oh, you just got out." And I'm like, "No, I retired. I have full retirement from the U.S. Army." They're like, "There's no way." I'm like, "Oh, well, there is a way." But mine's unique. It's not some special package that no one knows about. It's a unique scenario that took place. And me and just a few people know what that is. And so when I got out, though, I still had to process out. They still retire me. And I was talked to by a bunch of key people, and so I retired. Well, when I got out, I thought, well, I'll go to a few other people I know. And I tried to pull some strings that way, and it didn't work. And so lawfully had to do things by the laws. Well, that didn't work. So, in my, whatever you want to call it, I was angry and mad. And, just like anybody else, when you're passionate about something and you're told to walk away, kind of like athletes have to do when they reach a certain point. And then, it's like, hey, you're not cutting it anymore. You probably want to retire versus us cutting you, giving you a pink slip, right? So it's a little bit more dignity in that for them. But so I went through some stages where I was just frustrated and mad, but and through my trying to figure out what the heck Obama was doing, I started digging into courts martials. I was looking at what he was doing with our courts martial inside the military, and I was reading all the courts martial that he changed. I mean, they went through so many amendments to the courts martialing. And if you read it and comprehend the language and the verbiage, it will read as if it favors the enemy or a terrorist that's detained more than it did the soldier, our own people, right? At the end of the day, if you're not taking care of your own people first, like President Trump talks about America first, then what the heck are you? So I started reading that and I started going, dang, there's something to that. And then I started looking at the medical codes of the military and looking at certain things over there. That didn't make sense. So I started, just comparing those. So then President Trump, when he rolled down the escalator and made his announcement, I had told people through my life, I didn't necessarily say Donald Trump himself, and that's the last time I'll call him by his full name because he's most worthy of honorable President Trump, wartime president, supreme commander. But I had told people in my lifetime, I'm like, the United States is a corporation. And whether you agree with that or not, think it's good or bad, that's your opinion. There's your opinion there. But we have built up to so much infrastructure. We have so many corporations that conjoin with each other, and everything's such a cylinder and operates together that you need someone who knows how to run that. Just simple, a businessman. And so I had made comments in my life because I went to business school. I have my MBA, and I'm a business-minded person. So I made comments like that. We need a businessman to run this nation. And then also maybe have the skill sets, obviously, of military, or be a good delegator to delegate to your generals. Hey, this is your job. You've been here your whole career. You know what to do, but do it this way. In the regiment, in the discipline, but also by what? Laws and orders as they read on paper, and then abolish the bad ones, keep the good ones, because there's several of those we got to get rid of. So when he rolled down the escalator, that's when I was like, this is perfect, because my family, some are liberal, some are not. And I was like, I'm the middleman smiling, going, this is about to get good. And but I'd already had some insider, not information and not like intel, but I'd already had an inclination of something that was coming because one of those generals had said something to me. And a few other people I knew had said something to me. And so I was like, when they said, oh, you're going to get to serve again, I was like, I'm looking at it as internally going, oh, I got a chance to get back in. It wasn't that, obviously. And so then I went and sat with some people I know, no cell phones, made sure they were about 3 miles down the road. We were sitting in a private, isolated place. And I specifically asked a few questions. I said, I need to know a few things for my sanity, one. And then two, I need to know these things because it will validate what I believe that I'm reading. And so I asked them those questions, and I said, I know you by NDA, you can't just shake your head, yes or no. And I will never reveal your names. And you just have to it's an honor code here. They were a certain entity and I was a certain entity. And I said, it's an honor code here. And you got to take my code and your code and trust me. And let's say me, I trust you. So I asked those questions and they shook their head, yes. And so it was the combination of that, because all this happened simultaneous. And then when President Trump moved the embassy and named Jerusalem capital, that's when I knew, okay, this went away from military and federal. It's still there, but this went biblical. All right, when he did that. And there's a lot of people out there confused about the Israel and Netanyahu and all that. It's because they don't really know the bigger puzzle here. They want to see stuff that they Google and find stuff they Google and make it fit their gut and their feelings. But that was massive biblical. in military terms first, and then federal second. And when that happened, that's when I knew it was game on, and everything I'd had confirmed to me was going to be a military government, a military occupation, a military operation with your continuity operations and continuity government. I knew there was going to be a full-fledged, we using our own laws and orders on our own land, in a different kind of strategy and tactic, a little slightly different than the martial law that was used in World War II on the U.S. You're talking about the same time period. December the 8th is when Franklin Roosevelt had a speech to Congress after December the 7th in Pearl Harbor. So it was the same time period. In that martial law, a president does not have to tell the people about martial law. It depends on what is taking place and what's good for his people. And if it's in protection of his people, he don't have to tell. This is all on .gov.mil. He does not have to tell that we're in martial law. And so many people don't realize that. And President Trump backs everything. He has proclamations. He specifically said, never again will we voice to the people what's going on with our military, because if you find out, guess who else finds out? So that's all you need is one quote. I tell people you don't need 2, 10, 15, 20 quotes from a man who has command. All you need is one command, one quote, and then soldiers who will do what? Follow those orders accordingly. So that's when I put it all together, and and then you couldn't have it until you had it. Like I hear people out there say, oh, I've been knowing this for 10, 15, 20 years. There's no way. It's not, the plan wasn't there. These laws and orders didn't get put into place until President Trump walked in there January the 20th, 2017, and that's when they got started. So you couldn't have anything until you have it, which is also should be validation for patriots that, look, this is a rolling operation. Just roll with it. It's not for you. It was designed to protect you, but it's not for you. Meaning this is not your war and your battle. And unfortunately, totally polar opposite of our founders had to do a bottom up operation because they didn't have anything yet. But because we have something now, and it got awry up here with all your congressmen and women, the judicial branch, especially all your judges and your lawyers across this land, it had to be the good guys up here, the good guys and gals that knows what's going on up here, had to go in there and do what? A fundamental reset, like our Declaration of Independence prescribes on paper. But it's up here, and then it's trickle down, because then when you fix your federal and military laws and orders, it's only going to trickle down, right? And it'll be a lot easier this time around to trickle down to all these levels of like your state government, and then get down to your legislative portions. It'll be easier to fix because those fundamental laws up here will be reset, and it can only work it's supposed to work this way, but because it went awry up here, when this gets fixed all the way down, then it'll work back this way. As President Trump said, we're taking the power out of DC and giving it back to the people. But he can't give the power back to the people when the people don't even have a clue what's going on lawfully. So I tell people all the time, if you don't have laws and orders, you're going to have pandemonium, chaos all the time. When you have laws and orders, you can expect to have something because you got to always keep people, as we call them military, squared away. But if you don't have it, you're going to have a lot worse versus having it and then having checks and balances and skill sets of people who can identify it's not how we do it and blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah. Lisa, you're muted.
Sorry, I had a barking dog. So that is just sort of how everything started, like the way you saw things and what happened in 2017 when President Trump. So let's kind of jump forward. I know you've spoken so much about, what we've affectionately come to call the Biden show and, what was really going on during that time, or the dash, if you will. But like, where are we today? I know that one of your latest posts on Telegram, you talk about how you just constantly talking about Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550. And is that kind of like an indication of what people are seeing, right? Because President Trump said they were never going to let anybody know what was going on while it was going on, right? So we can assume maybe when the public is seeing things, when we're hearing it, that it's already done, and they're allowing us to know what happened. But how does that all fit into where we are like today militarily?
Well, so first things was 2017 to 2021 is a clear resetting of the legislative branch, because that's when all these unique laws and orders were invoked. Now, the laws were already there, but the orders weren't. So that's that. Then the 21-25, which was a puppet government for the quote unquote Biden, and then it was a government in exile for President Trump, which those two coincide, and those are unconventional warfare. And the laws show that. And right before the 2021, so in December, is when you're invoking of your federal mission resilience strategy, which was your continuity government executive order, which was anniversary was yesterday, 5 years ago. And then December the 10th will be the 5-year anniversary of the most recent order of succession within the Department of Defense, now the Department of War. So every president has an order of succession in these departments that will coincide with it. So there's a order of precedence on a bigger level. If something happened to the president, right, that's on the bigger level, just as a whole. But every one of the departments have an order of succession as well. And so that's very key, that quote unquote Joe did not have an order of succession within the Department of Defense, which is now the Department of War, and then also the National Security Council. Well, the National Security Council are your Joint Chief of Staffs. There's your military generals and admirals right there. So if you don't even have an order of succession within your National Security Council, how are you a legitimate president? You're not. All right. And then also, it sounds so easy in another way, but executive orders and national emergencies are your federal side, even though that's your executive branch, all right, which is your president. But it sounds so easy, but executive orders with national emergencies, this is where Congress tried to limit the president in 1973. They tried to make it where he could only declare a national emergency to be able to use the troops, give them a 48-hour notice. Somewhere in the 48 hours had to give them a notice. Then he only had 60 days with that military and an additional 30 extension. After that 90-day, Congress had to step in, which is very key. Because right now, as we see it, they're just now talking about the War Powers Resolution Act to the public. They got the Democrats going, oh, we're going to block the troops from doing this, this, and this in Venezuela. Well, what shows that it's an operation, your absolute validity and proof, is that the Southern Command launched the operation in the Caribbean way back April the 1st, 2020. It didn't have a name yet. They just now named it Operation Southern Spear, but it started way back April the 1st, 2020. And that is absolute proof on Southern Command website, official.mil site. It's there, right? It's called the Enhanced Counter Narcotics Operation in the Western Hemisphere. What is President Trump talking about right now? The Monroe Doctrine, which is all about what? The Western Hemisphere. All right. And everything is being geared around the term Western Hemisphere in the news. That's all you hear. Western Hemisphere, Western Hemisphere. Well, those are comms, and those are proclamations, though, at the same time. So they're comms, but they're also proclamations, meaning we got a time signature here. President Trump saying this way back here. So when you get down the road and there's disclosure, you're going to have all these proclamations, which are timestamps, and no one can argue with it. But they also was very key to use a puppet government, because you couldn't make this look one-dimensional. You couldn't make it look Republican only. You had to have a quote-unquote puppet government to also continue all these executive orders with national emergencies. That way it looks what? Compliance. Well, the liberals can't be yelling that Donald Trump is a dictator and a Nazi and all these things, because all you got to do is say, well, even though I know it wasn't real and it was strategic and it's all military, if they never come to that, they still have to come to grips with, well, your dude complied with it because your dude continued it and forwarded it over to back to President Trump for this go around for 47. So see, that's a principle with integrity. Principle says, forget what you feel about it. Principle says this is how an executive order works, and this is how a national emergency works. Principle says if you don't like it, then your guy should have terminated it or revoked it. That's the principle. The principle is not whether you like it or not, right? The principle is this is how the law works. This is how it operates. So you needed a puppet government to make the compliance there, to make it bipartisan. All right. And we got that check mark. So it's brilliant that they did this and that we have this option. And then you got to know, like joint publication 3-57, that, civil military operations, it specifically says the military can work with law enforcement. And it says generally you don't want them to. No, generally, because we don't need to get to this point that our military has to work in civilian. But that's where you tell your friends and family, because of your opinion kind of conversation, we had to use this because you don't even know how to work on a simple level with government and how it functions. So we had to get to this point. And this clause says specifically, generally you don't want Title 10, which is active duty and reserves. Generally you don't want them operating with law enforcement unless what? The Constitution or Congress deems so. Well, that is where your Title 50, Chapter 33, 1550 is. So right now, all of your friends and family are just now seeing them talk about the war powers. The Democrats are saying they're going to block the military again, and because there's not a congressional authorization. Yeah, there is. That's your 1550. That is a congressional authorization because the 1550 is in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2020. The National Defense Authorization Act is your defense budget that Congress comes up with. Here's your budget. Here's what you'll be working with this coming year. In that 1550, it specifically says it's temporary, meaning it's not for future presidents. All right. Well, you got to look at the entry. It was entered there December the 20th, 2019. So if it's not for future presidents, then there's a double validity. What did President Trump just do last Monday? He said that all executive actions are what? Null and void.
Right.
They're canceled, as if it says what? No legal effect. No legal effect means it never existed. So go back and look at the entry of this 1550. It was December the 20th, 2019. It says in there it's not for future presidents when it says it's temporary entry. So if it's a temporary entry, then it's not for quote unquote Joe. It wasn't for him over in 21 to 25. But then you go down to the bottom, executive documents. The executive document in layman's term in 1550 at the bottom is quote unquote Joe relinquishing all authority and command of the military over to the Secretary of Defense. Now go back to December the 10th, 2020. The most recent to date, as we speak, order of succession within the Department of Defense is from December the 10th, 2020. Who was the president then? Donald John Trump.
Right.
So see, all those tie together to show you that it's a temporary coding. One, it's not for future anywhere, especially after President Trump. So it's a strategic plan. And then the Title 50, that's your war and national defense. That's your National Security Act of 1947. That's what Title 50 is. So there's your National Security Council. How come Joe didn't have an order of succession within it? So how could Joe talk to the Joint Chief of Staff? He couldn't. Go back to executive document. And then Chapter 33 is your War Powers Resolution Act. So they're building all this up. They're getting it ready for your bigger disclosure because naturally some people out there thinking we're going to war with Venezuela and all these other things. So they're getting people built up for what? It's called a bait. We're baiting them. Then we're going to switch it and then hit them with, here's what we're doing. So, all this is leading to, so you had Yemen, Iran, Venezuela, and Israel, and Ukraine. Every one of those are in executive orders from 2016 and past. So see, they're all from the swamp. And that's what people need to realize. Every one of these operations are not President Trump's. So Yemen didn't capitulate. Iran didn't capitulate. Venezuela didn't capitulate. Ukraine didn't capitulate. Israel is a whole different kind of topic anyway, so there wouldn't be a capitulation necessarily. But They're all things that President Trump would have inherited, even though he didn't inherit this. This is an operation. It's not an inheritance. This is an operation. And so Yemen, all you got to do, your friends and family go, oh, you're mad over Venezuela. Where was your same anger for Yemen? We were bombing the hell out of Yemen just a few months back. Where was your same frustration for that? You weren't, we're going to war with Yemen. Oh, where was that? Nobody was saying that, right? Because they don't even know. They've never even heard of Yemen.
Right.
Most of them, they can't even put it on the map, right? So all these things are from those executive orders with national emergencies from Obama all the way back to Jimmy Carter. And so they're building it up. They're getting all those terminated. They're, we got the nuclear facilities. That's the biggest one with Iran. We're taking down all these drug cartels, all special operations. I was just on with General Paul Vallely back in April. We were all on the panel in April, and he told the whole world in April, he said, we have special operations all over Mexico, all over Central and South America. We're all over it. And it was his plan. He said, I gave President Trump 2 plans, a defensive plan and an offensive. He went with my defense first by building the wall. Now he's doing my offensive plan. He said, actually, I think that's a genius chess move to flip it. He said, I would have done offensive first if it had been me, but he went defense first, built the wall, then going on offense, meaning, even if there was a place where they ran to, they can't run past the wall. So, they're going to run into it. All these things are military strategies and tactics, and it's leading to President Trump's all roads lead to Obama. But what they're doing, and instead of telling on these people, they're enforcing the laws as prescribed on paper. Enforcement means exposure, because nowhere in the past, in anybody, especially all of us living in the U.S., all of the past, they didn't enforce them to the full extent as prescribed by the law. They had agendas and motives and ulterior motives and all these other things going back here behind the scenes. If you'll read President Trump's new national security strategy, it says that in the primacy of nations, read that clause in there. He's talking about we're going to be America first. Well, people hear that, they don't get that. It's saying that, hey, we've been everybody's Atlas. We've been that. We're not doing that anymore. We will help people. We're not going to say, oh, the heck with everybody, but that's what's taking place. And so many people are not seeing the bigger 40,000 foot view. And some don't know to look at the 40,000 foot view because they don't know there's a 40,000 foot view. But that's exactly what's taking place. And they're funneling all these people. Now, I know all of it's already pre-recorded. Every bit of what everybody's watching, I always keep it local. What everybody's watching is already pre-recorded. Meaning even when you see President Trump on a video, it's already been done. Yeah, I mean, that's why they show him one day on a video and the next day he's playing golf and he looks completely different. It's not the same guy. It's because he isn't the same guy, right? So all the stuff you see is pre-recorded. And so what they've done is they funneled all these people, and they know the ones behind the scenes that were detained that did what? Capitulated, white flagged it, said, I'll be a part. Yes, I'm guilty, but I'll give you what you need to know. I'll tell you what you need to. The people who complied quicker got better deals. Now, you don't get a deal for crimes against humanity. You don't get that, or treason. You're done either way. But there's a way that they can still do it with some form of dignity and make it look like someone got a funeral, such as Dick Cheney, George Herbert Walker Bush, where they still had a wrinkled flag, but they still gave them a funeral, right? So that was someone who would have capitulated, right? But they still were shown to people who know that this. So what they did, they funneled these people, and they made them white flag it all along the way. The ones who didn't, or the ones who waited longer, the worse the egg is on their face, what they're showing people on TV. You know, something like the Charlie Kirk thing. Also, the quote-unquote assassination of President Trump. Those would have been things way back here that someone did not capitulate. And they say, okay, well, you know, we got you. We have everything. We just want you to admit to it. You on camera, you on video, where the people can see that you admitted to it. And see, they'll have that in history. You'll see it somewhere along the way. You'll see all these capitulations, the ones who did, the ones who confessed, because it can't be me. It ain't a general. It's not an admiral. It's not all them who can do what? They can't exonerate President Trump. You can't. No one can. Only the liberals and the ones who are evil, crooked, corrupt, only they can exonerate President Trump with a what? Capitulation and a confession.
Derek, you mentioned Charlie Kirk and you mentioned the assassination attempt. Can you talk more about how that relates to capitulating?
Well, that's a long topic. That's a whole other conversation itself. But briefly, when the laws more than clearly outline, the laws and the orders more than clearly outline a strategic and special operation using irregular and unconventional warfare tactics. Now, this is where someone would have to be read up, especially on what I talk about, but also read up on irregular warfare, unconventional warfare, the art of war, and then know how those coincide. Also knowing your laws and your orders currently invoked, right, and the ones that apply to the operation. When all those clearly outline a strategic operation, special operation, using those tactics of a government in exile and a puppet government, which everybody witnessed, whether they want to believe it or not, doesn't matter. They witnessed it. When all those outline that, then you can go into our intricacies of like an irregular warfare book or an unconventional warfare pocket guide, books, manuals, publications, and you'll find that the assassinations are an actual part of a resistance in a revolution. All right. And it's a psychological warfare. It's to flip all these people. It's kind of like, I always use this analogy. I always use it because there's a lot of parents out there. And when you're raising your children, you're trying to be the best parent you can be, or you should be, and you're trying to be the best parent. Well, your children, when they're young, they don't have a clue that a shiny knife, it looks like a shiny toy. They don't know it's a knife that can hurt them, cut them, do some harm to them, right? So you take it away from them, and they cry, and they get all, they don't realize what you're doing is protecting them, right? And then one day, when they get of age, you can say, hey, when you were a child, you thought this was a toy. And boy, you cried. Oh, you cried when I took it away from you. But then they may say, oh, thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dad, for being such a good parent, for always looking out for me every move and every step I make. Well, that's what the military is doing right now. They know Americans have no clue what's going on. Americans can't even name the three branches of government. Just if you randomly walked up to someone on the street and just said, hey, on the spot, name the three branches of government. 68% can't do it. 68% of 350 million. 68% of 350 million is a lot of people.
Yeah.
All right. It cannot just name it. But if you said, hey, what's your opinion on the president? Oh, boy. Hell hath no fury. If they're liberal, they're going to go off on you. Oh, he's a dictator. He's a Nazi. But they can't even name the three branches of government. So they don't even know functions and operations on the simple, much less the complexities. And like I say, these people would not even recognize a wolf in sheep's clothing if it presented them as their dear, sweet grandma in their own living room. So it takes massive skill sets. And if they only knew people like me are actually more in their favor than anybody, because I don't care what you are. That's not up for me. That's up to you and your spiritual, whoever you believe. That's not up to me. Right? I want people to come to their own conclusion that, like I did, I was given the opportunity of life, and I took it, and I did everything along the way to, represent my upbringing, my family, and then also my friends. And I have accountability partners who keep me in check. That's what everybody's supposed to do, right? Are we perfect? No. So what the military, generals, admirals, and this strategy is doing is protecting all the people, all right, and using psychological warfare to reflip their thinking, which will actually reprogram to do what? Educate people on what you're supposed to know, not on propaganda and drama and all these things that pin Americans, especially against our core values, which are race, religion, politics, and things of that nature. Those are our core values. That's how we're founded. All right. So we don't need people arguing over our core values. And that's what's been taking place. And people stick their nose where they don't need to stick their nose. And so when you go in there and you flip that, right, and you take out all the evil, corruption, etc., and you flip all that too, that's taking place back here. That's your 40,000. That's going on. Then you do these little things. You get them engaged. And like I tell people, if you're mad, we got you. You're still engaged. Even if you're mad, you're engaged. You know, you call me a name, hey, you know, it's like a rite of passage for me. Call me an a-hole or this, that. No, hey, don't bother me. I know what I know. You can't take it away. All right. But I also know who I am and what I've been tasked to do. You can't take that away either. Right. So you let them go on and they're going to get somewhere. They're going to get over there in a little quiet spot. And they're going to get that little hamster's going to start rolling up there and they're going to think about it. Right. And at the end of the day, they're still going to have a choice somewhere along the way in life where they're going to hit a wall too and a roadblock in a funnel. And they're going to have to go by principle and integrity. You can't be yelling and calling President Trump a dictator, a king, and a Nazi when your dude comply with it. Now, they don't ever have to know what I know. But the assassination portions are straight up unconventional warfare. And it's a flip it. The passages behind it on the you can go to your audience can go to Google and type in 2016 unconventional warfare pocket guide. All right, and click on the government it's like a govinfo.gov, and then click on PDF and pull it up. Go to page 11. There's a pyramid in there, and ironically, that's our special operations resistance, but it's called a revolutionary pyramid, and it's a resistance pyramid. Well, in 1966, the first pyramid was put out. The word was agitation. Well, right before that, President John F. Kennedy had written a letter. It was April 1962. He wrote a letter that he wanted all military to implement guerrilla warfare and to dominate guerrilla warfare because our enemy was already going to use it. So if we dominate it, our enemy can never do what? They can never one-up us because we dominate the field. Right. All right, so he did that. Well, we all know what happened with JFK. 1966, though, Special Operations Command puts this pyramid in. Resistance, revolution, word agitation. What are the odds that all those years later, after President Trump had rolled down the escalator already, what are the odds that unconventional warfare changes the word agitation to assassination with the same clauses behind it? All right, it ain't there, right? And the same tactics behind the word assassination. It says to advocate national awareness. I mean, all these little things. So did it do that? It's like I tell people, did it leave Pennsylvania? Yeah, it did. All right. Did it make you mad? Did people get mad at the three-letter agencies? Oh, yeah. They were cussing, yelling at the CIA, the FBI, and everybody and anybody, right? They were blaming even local law enforcement. A lot of Republicans. So every one of those bullets after the word assassination, it checked off. So it's a checkmate. It worked. All right. It got people's attention. But then what did people do? If you ask people right now, I don't know how you'd form the question, but they don't even remember President Trump being quote unquote assassination attempt. All they focus on is Charlie Kirk, which shows people are guilty by what? They have a short attention span.
Yeah.
And they forget about something that quick. You're not supposed to, right? You're supposed to always walk around with the simplicities of government, the simplicities of military. And people are so used to 24-hour news, 24/7 news that they don't even talk about quote unquote assassination with President Trump anymore. Yes, long gone, foregone. Don't even talk about it. So little things that, the assassination, it's all just a flip. It's all an unconventional warfare tactics to get people's mind. And it did that with Charlie Kirk. Now I tell people, look, here's my opinion, even part of doing what I do. But if it took a civilian who's never been in the military to wake you up, you in dire straits, because we have memorial graves all across this land, rolling hills and rolling stones of men and women. Really, majority of them are children, if you will, because once you get 40, 50, 60 years old, a 17 to 20-year-old is a child to you, right? They never got to live their life.
Right.
Majority of those Rolling Stones out there in those fields, 17, 18, 19, 20. There's a few, yeah, in their late 20s, 30s, 40s, yeah, but they're fewer in those numbers. And there's so many more who are so young who died for you in this nation.
Yeah.
And that's how spoiled Americans have gotten, to where they don't even, they hear military and they're appreciative of the thought, but they don't know the intricacies of what goes in and day out to allow them to be spoiled in the greatest nation of all. And so we had to get to this point in history, unfortunately, because of those mindsets. But, I know people don't like game theory sometimes, but hey, you better be glad we have it. You better be glad some of us know what we're doing, because if you didn't have that, you'd be in really big trouble. Big trouble.
Yeah. Now, we've heard Trump mention Article 2 and I'm a wartime president and this peaceful transmission to military power, which we've seen. And you've obviously said that they couldn't put a lot of these orders in place and stuff until Trump actually got into the position. But how long before that do you think this military operation has been gamed and planned out? Going back to Kennedy, maybe, or if not before.
Well, the first thing people need to remember is a general, good generals and good admirals. It's like a good fraternity, if you will. They all know, a lot of them know each other, and a lot of them meet with each other, in certain places, especially secret. And in history overall, there's only been a few bad, apples out of the bigger barrel. Now, I know the old quote that one bad apple can spoil the whole barrel, but in this situation, generals and admirals on the big scale, no. And then they've been meeting for years. That's why President Trump said, when he said, I have 200 generals backing me, that was a quote that my grandfather and great uncles talked about. And my grandfather and great uncles didn't even know each other. This one side of the family and the other side. How did these men who would all right now be in their late 90s and 100s, how did they all know that quote? They've been hearing this for years. And every man that I know that's past 85 right now that is still living had heard that quote, that 200 generals said, never again will we let happen in this country what happened under JFK. Now, that wasn't 200 collected generals in one room, and that wasn't some lost quote. That was just men who had known a general somewhere along the way that had a good relationship with them or had worked with them at some capacity, whether in the military or out of the military, who had said this and confided like that. But how is it that so many people, have heard that?
Right.
Well, this would have been a plan, sure, to where, and I know people, this is why it had to be delicate, because people will hear, well, if the military has always been planning this, why didn't they do it before? Because all the chess pieces have to align to where you prevent catastrophe, and also you limit civilian casualty as much as possible. That's what a general is always thinking about. A good general and a good leader, period. Don't just have to be a general, but a good leader and a good general, though, and a good admiral, they're always thinking of how do we save lives, women, children especially. All right. And that's why President Trump also smears the whole quote unquote Biden thing. That'd be a smear. There's another thing that would have been something back here that someone didn't do in the Afghanistan was a spear. It was a spear tactic. Because when you look on that aircraft, even though I know that was all fake, it was all part of an operation. When you look on that aircraft, what did it look like? If any of you have ever gone through the pain of watching a 3-hour movie of Titanic, you'll know exactly what it looked like. When the guy was hiding himself, and he was getting on with all the women and children, that's exactly what it looked like. And that's what President Trump talks about. You have to want to fight for your nation. Every nation, every man, especially 17-year-old up, every one of you, you got to want to fight for your nation. Just the same as we have fought for our nation. And so many people along the way, they don't want to do that. But look at the men. Look at the men who are fleeing. it's a lot more males than it is females and children that are fleeing these nations. They're not standing and fighting. They're not uprising. They're not replicating what our founders did. Our founders were like, give me liberty or give me death, right? And they stood here and fought. They didn't get back on the ship and go back to England and go, oh, well, you know, if I'm going to capitulate here, I might as well go back. Hey, no, they said, I ain't going back. I'm fighting right here. This is my new turf, and I'm going to fight for it. So many people don't understand that mindset. And so that's kind of what, you know, the whole bigger picture is. But the generals would have planned this a long time, and the chess pieces had to align. And then once it's go time, though, is no turning back. But, yeah, I mean, when you look at the chessboard, especially when you know what you've read and studied, for this to go as smooth as it has, well, in one way, it's to be expected, right? I'm going to be a little braggadocious here. In one way, it's to be expected because we're that good and we're that badass. All right. The United States of America, our military, our generals, our admirals are that badass. So in one way, I'm going to brag on that because we have all the chess pieces that we need to just go, you're nothing, you're easy, you're this. The biggest portion was going to be taking out the swamp, right? And that was mainly chessboard with here and laws and orders. All right. And to be expected, they're going to retaliate. Nationally, like I tell people, you should expect to hear, oh, that's against the law. Or that you want them to say that. You want them to say that because weren't you in charge of this law? This law's been on paper long before President Trump. You once were over this law and operated with this. You didn't enforce it, but you had control of this at one point. Right. So if it's against the law, what is it doing in law? Why didn't you abolish it? Right. So see, you want it if people would just listen and just divorce your feelings and emotions, you want them to say that because President Trump enforcing the law is exposing everything they didn't do and should have and didn't. Right. Because they weren't thinking about you and I. They weren't thinking about every American. They were thinking about themselves. And they took over the judicial system, especially. And the judicial started telling the legislative and the executive what they were going to do. Pass this law, do this, do that. They were setting it up for themselves. And they set up their global alliance. They set up all their federal bank, their global banks, federal banks, etc. Rest is history. So that was going to be the biggest war was President Trump. Follow the money, find the money, right? But not tip them off and alert them yet, but dry them up when you can and catch them when you can. So the strategy was more of a chessboard from that standpoint. The military portions are the easy portions because we have full capabilities to decimate these cartels and nuclear facilities, etc. We have all those capabilities. That's the easy part. The hardest part was going to be, okay, all right, how do we funnel these people, make them quit? I love the quote. I got to say this. I just got to say it because Nick Saban's a coach of he was the coach of the University of Alabama, and he won all these national championships in college football. And one of his sayings to his players was, make their ass quit. Like you hit them so hard and you come in with your game plan and every man is doing what you're supposed to be doing on the team, you make their ass quit. And that would be the mentality of the military is going, we're going to make their ass quit. They're going to tell on themselves. We're not going to tell on them. We're not going to be a tattletale. We're going to make them quit. We're going to hit them with their own game. We're going to funnel them to this point. They got to give up or, die, as the saying will be, depending on what kind of criminal they are. They're going to either give up or we'll make them give up. So things like that. And so that's the easy part. But the generals and the admirals and the strategy, it can't get any more. Not that you'd want a plan that would be better than this in the future because you don't want to get to this ever again. But I don't think there's ever been a plan like this to take down. So I don't know. Putting a timestamp on it. I mean, the generals of the JFK era would have had to pass that down to other generals, but it's pretty much that camaraderie and knowing that, okay, we can't let this happen. And there's one thing we do have in common a lot more than anybody. We do, at the end of the day, we're loving people. God made us loving creatures more than he made us evil. We have malicious people who have chemical imbalances that have never had any feelings or emotions. So those are easy to identify. And those are the things, though, that we've allowed, especially in the U.S., we've allowed people to take up more for those kind of people instead of understanding the farmer mentality that sometimes there's some maim animals that just are never going to be. So if you'll nip it in the bud beforehand, it won't be a lifetime of pain for those people. So, you know, there's some people who have gotten away from the old school mentality. And the old school has never been bad. The old school mentality has always been good for society. And, you know, I had a great uncle. Every time he put a cow down, he prayed over the cow. He said, I hate to do this, but I know if I don't do it now, that animal's going to live in pain all these years. Right. And he'd pray over it. God, receive this animal that you know, gave us, but you know, it was a maim animal. Put it down. Did he want to do it? No. But did he have to? Yes. And did he do it for the ethics of that animal? Yes. And too many people don't understand that mentality, but that's what ends up with all the corruption we've had, because you have some people out there that have no conscience, they have no heart, and even their own crimes don't mean anything to them because they don't have that. They don't have that guilty conscience that you and I feel whenever we do certain things. You know, even at the end of a podcast, I'll cuss sometimes and I go, but I'll get better, right? if that's something that I think is not good for me, right? But that's something I feel. That's a guilty conscience for me. Or someone pulls out in front of you. You give them the sign language, right? You New Yorkers, y'all do that like
in New York. Yep.
I mean, y'all are on the horn 24/7. I'm like, hey, yeah, you know, like that's just like your love language is your horn on your vehicle, you know. So
or the hand signal,
or the sign language, you know. So little things like it, but naturally we're a loving creature to begin with if we don't have those things. And so, you know, most people want to do good. Most people want to go by the books. So how did we get such a society where everybody's just fighting over just the smallest intricate little things that don't, at the end of the day, when you go home, how you live your life don't affect me, and how I live my life don't affect you. Why are you so mad about these things? Right. So that's the chessboard that had to be played. And that's the psychology and the psychological warfare aspects that had to be played to get people not in a one size fits all, but to get people to realize that, look, your personal life don't belong up here. Your you know, who you marry, like, love, all this don't belong up here. Right. It don't have anything. There's no correlation with that whatsoever. But that's what they did. The deep state. They got everybody's personal lives involved in matters that didn't need to be involved in. Now our society over here thinks it's a cultural norm, and it's not a cultural norm, right? So that was the strategy that would have taken immense thinking from the standpoint, how do we do this without tripping people into a, you know, war, civil war, riots, real riots, and things like that. So that's been genius watching this play out, because people get mad, they cuss, they yell at you, they say, oh, that's your opinion, but they're not hurting you and they're not harming you. So that's the good thing, is they're engaged. And it's the bait and switch. Bait them up, hit them with this. Because at the end of the day, what we're operating with is principles and integrity. And at the end of the day, you can't argue with when they made it look both ways. And that's what they did. So now every American's going to have to be hit with a principle and integrity. Yeah. And I'm willing, and you know, it's not about me, but like I tell people, if you'll make it about yourself for a moment, say, are you willing to sacrifice humility, right? Show some humility, and let, like the military would be like, okay, if people don't want to believe in the government in exile and the puppet government, even though that's what you watched,
right?
You win people over by, hey, You let them feel like they won in another manner. And even if they don't want to believe that yet, they're still going to be hit with, hey, well, Joe Biden, he did all these. He continued all these. So that's compliance. So you can't be yelling Nazi, dictator, king, threat, and all those things when your dude did all the same things, continued all those, just to hand right back to President Trump. So see, I'm willing to sacrifice and be humble to know that they don't know what they don't know yet. And if they'll just accept when they get to that wall, when they accept principle and integrity, even if they just bite their tongue and walk away, you'd be like, gotcha. Yeah. They don't even have to say you were right. When you say, all right, let's just pretend I don't know what I know. Let's just pretend I'm not who I am. Let's just do that. All right, there wasn't a government exile and there wasn't a public government. Let's go to executive orders and national mercies. This is how they operate. This is how they function. President Trump invoked them. Your guy continued them.
Mm-hmm.
Genius.
And so you can walk away knowing what you know. You hit them with a principle and integrity and say, all right, well, by principle and integrity, if my guy's a king and a dictator and a Nazi, yours is too.
Yeah, perfect. Just a quick add-on to that, talking about the generals. What do you think that Hegseth meeting was all about when they called in all the military commanders? About 800, wasn't it, from all around the world?
Oh, that was more of your visual of validation of what had already taken place. What we had talked about. President Trump, when he said on the campaign trail that I have 200 generals backing me and more to come, that was your more to come visual. And also it's where we are. We're in a partial continuity government. The law shows this. So we're on the ladder. So we're probably in the 3/4, obviously, to the 100 finale. All right, the 4-4. So that was, when was that? It's been a couple months back now.
Mm-hmm.
So look at that visual. And now look at what they're just now talking to people. They're just now disclosing the verbiage and the conversational pieces of your war powers resolution, which I've been talking about this for a long time. Now, not just me, but I'm saying I've been talking about it for so long of the Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550. Well, Chapter 33 is your War Powers Resolution Act. So they're just now disclosing that to the public. But where did they disclose it? After these visuals of military, after the visuals of your National Guard in the streets. So they're just now disclosing that. But listen to what they're saying. They got the Democrats saying that they're going to block the military because there's no congressional authorization. Yes, there is. That's the 1550. That is your congressional authorization. And it was a Democrat House under President Trump and a Republican Senate that passed that defense budget. So it was a bipartisan already back then. And it's double bipartisan because, quote unquote, Joe kept it in place. Right. So they're just now disclosing that, which means we're getting to your substance of your bigger operation. And so what they disclose to people, I don't know how they're going to do it, but Hegseth, obviously, it was an article yesterday I was reading that Hegseth was, defending President Trump's actions. And if people would only know whether you're Republican, conservative, liberal, Democrat, whatever you are, that goes back to, again, come to the neutral trough here, come right here. Forget what you are for a moment. Let's go with laws and orders. How does the military work? Where's the authorization? Here's the authorization. You either like it or you don't. If you don't, then you're just, the term I use all the time, ignorant, because you can be educated. Do you want to be?
Mm-hmm.
So that authorization is there. So they're just now disclosing that. So how they choose to play it out, I don't know how they're going to do it. I'm not in that command room, that war room. But it is, they're baiting them. That's your bait. That's the bait. They set the bait. Now they got people talking about that, stirred them up. They're going to hit them with the switch here soon. And however they do it, I don't know. But, we're getting into a good season for Americans. Americans love Christmas, that sense of family, and you can just feel that feeling, the snow and the lights and all those things. You know, I don't know. It may be a good Christmas. It may be a good New Year's. Who knows? But, you know, I know that this cannot keep on past July 4th, 2026, because what would be the point of a 250th birthday that President Trump talks about? And he gave markers, Memorial Day and July 4th, 2026. So Memorial Day's already passed. So now we're seeing heavy military talks. After Memorial Day, it's been heavy military everything, visual to the public. War Powers Resolution, the generals, the admirals. So they're being heavy. President Trump started after Memorial Day. He started heavy on the All Roads Lead to Obama. Repost, retruth, if you'd like to see military tribunals. He's been hammering that. He's not been talking a whole lot, though. If you look at his True Social right now, he's not saying a whole lot on True Social. He may post 2, 3, 4 things a day. Other than that, he's not posting a whole lot right now. So that also shows you where we are. That, all right, the commander's getting really quiet. Things are getting really, really quiet. And that's what they call the calm before the storm. But it'll be a final storm because we're in the partial continuity government, which means it's already been partially revoked, which means it's priority. It's still there. So that tells people when there's a partial, well, it's still priority. They didn't forget about it. They didn't do what Congress used to do and issue a national emergency and drag it out 40 years. No, it's there. So people just have to just know it's a rolling operation. And there's enough for people to go back and sink their teeth into in the past to fully catch up. There's so much that they can read and study that they wouldn't have to be bored twiddling their thumbs. Always go back and read and study. Always be sharp in your skills, always. Even if you think you're the most well-read, studied, versed patriot out there, you're not. You know, always read and study. And any good general and commander will tell you that. Hey, if you think you're at some place in your life where you know everything, no, you don't. Go back and read and study.
Yeah.
You know?
Trump said we had a really good Christmas, didn't he? But that was about 4 years ago. So hopefully this is the one. Now, I personally hope if we do get an EBS, it goes off on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and Boxing Day, so that when we're all with our families, we are going to have a really nice Christmas this year. But that's just my personal thought. Do you think we're going to see an EBS, Derek?
I don't know. I mean, I've always said I think that if they use the emergency alert system, that's going to be a more, not doomsday. It'll be more of a good strategy, which does get people together. I personally wouldn't want it to be on those days. Me as an opinion, just for fun's sake, laughing wise, it would be great if it's like a national championship or a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's watching TV and they're like, oh, and then boom, game over. You know, not the game over, but we interrupt this, program. And then everybody's like yelling at the bar owner, hey, flip the TV back over. And he's trying to flip it and every channel's the same. Then they're like,
amazing.
Oh, you talking about pandemonium, but in a good way. It wouldn't be a bad panic. It wouldn't be like, oh, we're being bombed right now. No. Like that, it would be a good panic where they're all like engaged and they're like, what just happened? Because, hey, a lot of Americans watch the Super Bowl also for commercials.
Right.
But that would be more epic, not taken away from a Christmas Day for kids and all that. That'd be more epic to where everybody, and then, when you're sitting in a pub or a bar, all the different terminologies around the world, when you're sitting in one of those, there's a lot of different people in there that someone's liberal in there, someone's Republican, right? But in a pub and a bar, everybody's pretty much acting, they may be drunk, but they're trying to act a certain way. That way they don't get their head knocked off.
Right.
So it'd be kind of funny to be sitting there and, and everybody's like, let me see your phone. And you're like, dang it, let me see your phone. And they're all the same, and the TVs, and especially in a pub and a sports pub, and there's TVs everywhere and every one of them. That and then make it epic like that, but not a doomsday. I don't think that we're ever going to do a doomsday thing because people are also kind of desensitized to the whole nuclear topic. And that nuclear could be the worst war you could ever have. As far as, ammo and bombs, et cetera, missiles and stuff. So people are kind of desensitized over that. They've heard it so much that it doesn't even faze them, really. Even some of the military saying, hey, if I were to do that to them, they wouldn't do that. They would, I've heard that for years, because they're what? They're kind of robotic, and they're desynthesized robots walking around. That wouldn't get them. What would get them is using the EAS with all of those faces, and it can't be just one. It's got to be all of them. And then all these faces are in like a General Assembly type setting, and they're all walking up like an award show.
Yes.
And when everyone's phones and TVs are together, no one can say they didn't see it.
Yeah.
Right? That would be epic, but it also wouldn't be to the point where it shouldn't create a meltdown of, like suicide and war and riots. That would be what did I just watch?
A massive truth reveal.
Yeah. And look, let's be honest. I tell Patriots all the time, I'm like, look, you're in a tiny percentile. When you look at a bigger world, you're still in a tiny percentile of knowing what you know. A majority of Republicans, conservatives don't even have a clue what's going on.
That's right.
So they would be just as shocked. They don't think they will, but they can be just as shocked. They think they're a President Trump supporter, and they might be, but they would be just as shocked to see what they've been witnessing as well from that manner. And the only way you can really flip the chessboard completely with the psyche is to have a complete resetting. That would be a complete resetting, and it'd be a great, going back to the parent, a great lesson to everybody that thought they knew what they've been witnessing. And it would be a great, to me, that now I don't know if they're going to use that or not, but to me, that would be a great way to just reset everything at the finale, right? And then, obviously they got to see some things like your military tribunals. They're going to have to see that. And then you reset everything. So I think that's the way that's what I would do, because that would be the ultimate, like, sit back going, all right, we're about to really get them. Bam!
Yeah.
That would be. I never even thought of like Super Bowl. That would, because even people that aren't into football, like you get so many people, right? That they're all over the world. So it's not just an American tradition. But, I wrote a few things down as you were talking, and it's so funny how some of the things you've educated and exposed about what's going on. And it always amazed me through the years when I would watch President Trump and I would see him and think, oh my gosh, like they just keep hitting away at him. And how does this man take it? But when you just explain the whole bait and switch, it puts a totally different perspective on let's just say kind of a nylon, like a Teflon, excuse me, not nylon, a Teflon surrounding on him, because knowing what's happening and what they're doing, like, yes, we kind of always knew he did, but still, you think, how much can somebody take? But really knowing that much more than any of us know, it does put you in the position of, like you said, like a parent. You're not going to be offended if your 2-year-old screams and says, I hate you and all these things, because you're doing it for their good, and you see the bigger picture. And at some point when they are aware and awake and older and understand, they're going to realize everything, why it was all done. And so I just, because I used to think to myself, like, oh my gosh, like, look at what they're saying, look at what they're doing, like just this over, like, empathy for, but you're just, even on this show, you put such a different spin on it. And even when you talked about the idea of, how he's so insulated, like we always knew, we knew that because, Q said that, but he really is, like he really is. So when we think, oh, this poor man, they're doing such mean things and saying such mean things, it's important for us patriots sometimes to realize that, yes, this is a military operation that's probably the greatest operation that ever existed. And these guys, they are just way and above anything anybody
Well,
can.
let me add to that really quick, because it's to add to that is that one, President Trump, every time I've been around him, he's just like he's got the combination of your military, and he's got the combination of the good old boy at the country club, and that's why they call him a blue collar billionaire, because he thinks and acts like that. One, going to the generals and admirals, this would have been something that they presented to President Trump in secret somewhere and said, look, here's our chessboard. He would have known this all along the way. Like he's like the alpha and omega, and I don't mean that sacrilegious, but he knows the chessboard, the alpha, the middle, the omega. So that was to be expected, everything that he's taken. Two, this goes back to the military, and this is where I like to have some fun with it. But when you call me an asshole, I take that as a compliment, right? Because it goes back to, one, I'm not your husband, I'm not your boyfriend, I'm not your cousin, your daddy. I'm not into people out there. I'm like, look, I'm they'll shoot the messenger. Well, you can't shoot the messenger that has a shield, because they prepared us for this. We've all been put here for this moment, and so you can't shoot a messenger that has shields. Like, I'm just gonna, hey, and if you're throwing shit at me, whatever, I got protected, right? So we take those as compliments in another manner, because we know what you don't know, and we still do it for your own good, like the parent analogy.
Yeah.
Then you flip it over and you go back to, I always show people, go watch the movie The Cowboys with John Wayne, when he took on all those young boys as cowboys, all right, because he couldn't find good hands, and he took on a bunch of young boys as cowboys. And there was a clip in the movie where boy gets out when they're crossing the river, and the horse rears up, throws the kid over. Another kid sees him, goes out there and rescues him. But the one little boy that saw it rode up to, he was known as Mr. Anderson in the movie, but rode up to John Wayne and said, he had a stuttering problem. And he looks back, well, he turns and turns the horse, and the other kid had got to him before, Mr. Anderson, John, could get to him. So pulls him out, and then he was sitting there, and he survived, but John looked over that little boy and said, and you damn near killed your friend. And he was like, but I tried, and then he was stuttering. He said, the hell you didn't. He was like, that would have been you in that water. We'd have heard you loud and clear. But nothing. And then he was like, you son of a bitch. Called him a son of a bitch, right? He said, what'd you call me? He says, you mean old son of a bitch? He was like, say that louder. He said, you GD mean son of a bitch. He's like, say it one more time. He said, you mean old GD son of a bitch. He said, I wouldn't make it a habit of calling me that, son. Well, he said it without stuttering. But see, look at what John Wayne did. He said, I wouldn't make it a habit of calling me that, son, and turned and walked away. So see, people who, he knew, but he's like, look, you're on my wagon trail. Even though he's a little boy, but it was a lot of lessons to be learned in that movie. It's like there are a lot of things you can take away from that. And so no matter what you can assail or yell or cuss or scream and all these other things, hey, when I know something you don't know, I'll be able to take it because you don't know what I know.
Yes.
Then the flippage of that is kind of like anybody else. When Tom Brady walks in a room, or John Wayne walked in a room, or whoever you are, when you're that kind of like, you just walk in the room. And that's what President Trump does. He just walks in the room, and he don't have to say, oh, blah, 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 or, hey, I have Tom Brady. I have 7, Super Bowl rings. Or you don't have to. You just walk in the room because people are going to know. And so many people, and I like some of these people who do say things to President Trump. I guarantee you put them in Mar-a-Lago, they ain't going to say a thing, right? Majority of them. Yeah. And then the ones who might, he would still applaud them because he'd say, well, at least you have the, you know what? Same thing John Wayne said, well, I wouldn't make it a habit of calling me that, son, right? So, you know, if you do have the guts and the, you know what to say it, then I'll applaud you for doing that. Kind of like me, I've gone all over this country at events public that I have to announce prior to that, hey, I'm going to be here. I've never seen but one person show up that claimed they hated me, and they didn't say a word. And it's all on cameras, you know, sheriffs and everything. They don't say anything because they don't have the what. They don't really mean it. They think they know what they think they know, and they don't know anything.
Yeah.
And when it's all presented to them, all on the way, all you have to do, like I've told people, all you have to do is know what you know. There's a bait and switch all on the way, and everything's going to prove out. And it does daily and weekly, because I'm not correct because I'm correct. I'm correct because I'm a veteran keeping my oath, and that oath is tied to a strategy and a plan. And that strategy and a plan are the laws and orders that uniquely, obviously, make up the 45-47. And so it looks like I'm correct, but it's nothing about me. It's about all of us that are doing the operations from way up here all the way down.
Yes.
And I tell veterans all the time, hey, I'm a walking example of getting an opportunity externally, but it's external, internal versus internal, external, or internal, internal. There's a lot of variables, but I'm a walking example of just knowing my oath, knowing the laws and the orders, and I got an opportunity to serve again in a different capacity. When I'm focusing on that lane, I stay in my lane. I don't think I'm bigger than what I am, but I also don't drop back and cut off days. I give everything what I'm supposed to do daily. And a lot of veterans could be in a lot of positions right now if they would have, you know, been paying attention and then make themselves applicable if they wanted to.
Yeah. Wow, brilliant. So brilliant. This was
I think the White Hats are giving us all a lesson in executive orders, you know, politics, all these sorts of things, so we sort of re-engage, because no one cared about politics, did they? No one cared about what's happening in Congress and stuff like that. We are all being given an education into what's going on. And obviously you talk about the plan. We, the people, are the plan. The plan is top down. We need to come up and rise. And when Trump says we're giving power back to you, the people, they've got to be at a certain level when that sort of power comes back to us, that we can hold on to it and never let it go and use it wisely.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah. But and on a deeper level, this plan has taught people to use their critical thinking. You know, we've been so dumbed down by the media, by schooling, by all these things that pull the creativity out of everybody and the ability to critically think and trust their instincts and their gut, and go within to reflect on things. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway, and hopefully will continue. All the operations, all of them, from COVID to, the inauguration speech to like every single one, like you said, there's so many operations going on. And I guess depending on where you're able to see, hear, and think, that's sort of the message you're going to get, and so they're talking to people on so many levels to like just snap them out of it.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what I say all the time. Again, it's like any kind of engagement. If you're mad, hey, you still reacted. We're trying to get you to a response, but even if you reacted, then you still reacted. And a reaction still can lead to a response. And that's exactly right. The dumbing down of America was the psychological operation that the deep state did. That not that it was necessarily a planned psychological operation, but that's what happened. So in reality, what we're doing is a counter psyop, and we're countering what the deep state had done. And so many people have been just educated on man-made systems. And I'm a walking. That's also what makes not me just about me, but what adds to me is I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Alabama, and I have a master's degree from Colorado State. So I've been through these institutions and these programs, and seen the curriculums and what they teach and how they talk, and and it, like I tell people, if you just want one, you just want a degree. When you go to college, learn the professor. Don't go in there. Divorce your feelings, divorce your emotions. If you're in a political science class, especially, learn that professor, and you'll pass that class, because that professor is putting their influence in there, which is also what's been dangerous in our society. That's why so many college students go home and start telling their mom and daddy what mom and daddy don't know, and that's what's led to all this tension in the United States as well, because so many of these institutions have been brainwashing those kids. And then it's a psychological way of going, well, maybe you don't know what mom and daddy taught you. Maybe because you're from podunk rural such and such, and you're backwoods this. And it's a way that they get in there and creep in their minds. And all that training that mom and daddy did, all of a sudden gets thrown out the window. All right. And all of a sudden, because daddy is a farm boy who didn't go to college, daddy can't know what I know. And that's what they've done to so much. And they've made things so materialistic. And it's their system. Like, oh, you got to have a associate's degree. Well, you can't be up here with a bachelor. We have a bachelor. You're not up here with a master's. We have a master's. You're not up here with a PhD. See, they created their own little system. And what's so funny about that, every time when I got out of the University of Alabama, every time I would get on, like, I don't even remember what the word now. It's not I can't remember those job, headhunter things out there. Every entry level would say 10 years experience. I'm like, how can you have 10 years experience for the entry level? Which means they're going to do what? They're going to put you at the bottom level and say, well, you got to work your way up for this. And then and you're always doing what? It's not working up in another kind of manner. It's like you can never get ahead, because there's already someone who had already gotten that spot who's working. Their system is so corrupt when it comes to marriage.
And let me tell you, you just made the analogy of the farm boy, the farm boy dad. No, I live in New York. Parents are professionals, wealthy, they've done things like whatever, according to the school system, they're successful. And those same kids come home, you're racist, you're this, you don't know that. How could the indoctrination and the brainwashing works no matter who the family is, because their goal is to break up the family and get rid of those values and be able to control the new generation. And they've done a great job up until this point.
Yeah.
Well, they've been successful, because no one, I grew up sitting around a dinner table, talking to mom, dad, grandparents. I grew up with a grandfather who always, prayed before we ate. Look at the family dynamics now. It is insane. Look at that. I don't know. I don't have children, but these kids that are on their phone 24/7, I would be a bad dad. I would have because I'd be like, you're not having that. You would have discipline. You would have structure. My dad, I had Nintendos and PlayStations growing up, but I had chores to do. I had things I had to do before I could sit down and do what I wanted to do. And if I didn't check those off, or if my homework wasn't correct when he checked it, I worked on that homework till it got correct. Well, if I never got it correct, and then all of a sudden I looked around, it was bedtime, guess what? It was bedtime. I didn't get to do what I wanted to do. So that made me do what? That made me focus a lot more on getting that problem or whatever it was I was working on correct. And then I would have me time. Yeah. That's how it worked.
And that's the other thing they've done, because generally there are some very, like, I'm a single sole parent, so it's, it's not an easy job, but they've also taken so much authority away from the men. So, where the father is supposed to be the leader slash, putting a lot of that discipline. Not that mothers don't, I'm not taking that away, but it's a different energy. Your mom's a different energy, and she brings something different to everything, in a different kind of structure, in a different kind of way. But when you strip down the men and, shame them the way they've done on a societal level for just being men and being leaders and being strong, right? That's toxic masculinity and all this other nonsense. It's just, and I think this stuff is all going to start reversing, no question. But unfortunately, I think there's going to be a segment of the population, age group, that have just gotten battered. They don't know this from that, and they are so messed up between, what they've been brainwashed with, what they watched on TV, what was on their phones, and what was in the food they were eating that was compromising them even more. And hopefully we'll be able to help them heal. But I think the tide's starting to turn. I can see it already. We all can see it already.
Well, I can prove two genders straight out the bat. So one year I was like 17 years old. I pulled a April Fool's prank on my dad. And I told him I got a girl pregnant. Yeah. Well, I told him outside because I already had an inclination of what he would do. And at that time, he would have been like 50, 58, 59. So he was still in his prime a little bit there. And we were out in a barn, and I had to put on that whole face and hold it together. And I'm good at pranks, so I did. And his face just started like shaking and trembling, and his eyes swelled up, not tears like a sissy boy, but like just, oh God, like a bull. Like I'm standing in a field wearing nothing but red with a big 2,000-pound black Angus bull, right? And I'm like, oh, this is like, I was holding it. I was holding it together to see what was going to lead to. Like, I was trying to wait to that moment of April Fool's. Man, he leaned in after me. We were running down. We had a pasture in a garden. He was chasing me, right? And he would I was faster than him just enough but he would catch up, and he'd kick me right in the ass with it. I mean, I'm talking about bam, he kicked me, right? It was right before I was supposed to go off to college, right? I tell you, just perfect timing. And I'm like, April Fools, I'm running. April Fools, he's like, I'm going to April Fools you. He kicked me again. Well, we finally both gassed out, and I'm down there like holding my man. I'm like, it's April Fool's. Check your watch. Anyway, my mom, you rest your life up. All right, completely different. Now, did that hurt me? No. Like, I get to tell this funny story now. Did my dad kicking me in the ass hurt me? No. Was it abuse? No. He really thought I just tossed my life away. Look how he responded. My mom, when I tried it on her, she
different reaction. And
different.
And you know what? It's unfortunate because there are so many like women that are, sole parents these days. And so they have had to learn how to have some masculine in them. And, it's still not the same. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, yes, you can try to scare the crap out of your kids, and you can, and a lot of single moms, God bless them, they do a good job. They raise good kids. They instill, but it's still not the same. And I have daughters, so it's a little different. I don't know if I would have had sons, it would have been a hard thing, to be able to instill a sense within them of being masculine and being strong, but also being afraid of me. You know what I mean? Like, it's a hard balance.
Well, my mom was 5'1" and my grandmother's like 4'11", but they commanded a strong presence too. So, I mean, it's just, my mom popped me on the face one time, and I was like, oh shoot. And she wasn't abusive but she didn't do that it wasn't her common way of discipline, but she sent a message one time, and I was like, oh boy, because I thought, I'm right at 6'5". I'm like, dang, how did she reach up? But anyway, she got up there, got my face.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah,
she got my attention.
Yeah.
So,
Now, Derek, you're all of us that have been paying attention over this last 4 or 5 years. The military and Trump and all these people have given us so many clues and stuff to look at, and you go into this in all your books and stuff. But just one example of that: the funeral they gave Joe Biden at Arlington Cemetery with that gun salute. Can you just sort of explain that to anyone watching? And because we've seen many examples of things like this. Uniforms are wrong and all this sorts of stuff.
Well, that just goes back to straight up. That's not an opinion. That's no one could argue that. Now, you don't have to like military, and you don't have to like the way the military does things, military discipline, military structure, military regulations, military customs, but that would fall into your regulations of the military and your customs. And then more specifically, the Army, because it's the Army who does it's our unit, the Presidential Salute Battery, which are the 3rd Infantry Regiment. They're known as the Old Guard. So that's just something that no one could argue, because then you'd have to argue the oldest unit in the Army, 1784. And so, that was a visual timestamp, time signature proclamation for anybody who saw what they saw at that time period to know that what you're about to witness is not authentic. It's not real from the standpoint of what people thought of Joe Biden. And then you'd have to know, obviously, that the continuity government was just invoked weeks before. And then you'd have to know that the last, which at that time you wouldn't have known that till, here we are, December the 8th, 2025. The most recent order of succession with the Department of Defense, was December the 10th, 2020, 3 days after the continuity government. So you wouldn't have known all that until you absolutely know it, right? So that would be a visual of the reconstitution of the executive branch. And so that's why, again, every person, can they know what I know? Yeah. But do they, will they? No, because they don't even know the simplicities of the 3 branches. So there was a reconstitution publication put there. Then you got another definition of a reconstitution. That means to take something from the state it's in and put it back into its original state. And that was put out January the 1st, FEMA and Department of Homeland Security publication. And that was all under your Federal Continuity Directive 1 and 2, which also has a military portion, a joint planning and a joint operations 3.0 and 5.0. They all accompany each other. So that would have been and it was for me, because I was like, okay, I'm not crazy. I already knew what was going on, but then that was my visual for sure confirmation of going, all right, keep doing what I'm doing, because I hadn't had my opportunity yet. I haven't had my, them bringing me into the picture. I mean, you got to remember where I was then. No one knew me, right? And so that was that validation of, okay, this is, that was a big stamp. But especially for my friends and family, oh boy, you talking about being an a-hole during that time period, but it was with a smile and, like you're just going, that's what that is. If you don't want to believe that, then you're just crapping on me in the military. So I was doing like that. But that's what that would have been. So, that day, one, people got to know, okay, there's your principle and your integrity. The 20th Amendment of the Constitution it's not even valid when you look at the original Constitution. The original Constitution doesn't say anything about term limits on the president. It doesn't tell Congress to put term limits anywhere. So the original Constitution doesn't say anything about that. But so the 20th Amendment, if you believe in one portion of the Constitution, you got to believe in all of it, right? Or the amendments. So he raised his right hand, 11:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. As soon as the president raises his right hand, after he takes that oath, there's going to be 4 flourishes. or ruffles. Dun, 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 4 of those. And then simultaneous to the 21 gun salute starting, Hail to the Chief starts playing. So they hit it on the same note. That didn't happen. Then they showed no review of the troops, which is very important. And then also the National Guard didn't salute the motorcade, didn't salute a moving flag. We always salute a moving flag. None of that happened. And then they rolled over to Arlington. And simultaneous, for the first time in United States history, they showed 2 different sets of cannons on January the 20th, 2021. So that was another indicator for people. The one set they showed with President Trump, the media told everybody, this is the official presidential salute battery, the Old Guard, the 3rd Infantry Regiment. Red carpet rollout, 4 cannons, 3 for fire and 1 for misfire. That's a 21 gun salute by definition. Well, all people have to do is go to YouTube and look up the 3rd Infantry Regiment, and they'll explain that. That was the inauguration service. And that's the whole world thought he was rolling away. Then the other flippage, what they were showing were the split screen of quote unquote Joe riding, and then they showed the 3 cannons at Arlington. Then they'd zoom in on those, and this is where we get called names, but whatever, I'm not fat shaming, but it's like Pete Hegseth said, there's a regiment to the military, and we got to get back to it. No, you can't help certain sizes and shapes, but the soldiers they showed were not in regulation uniforms. All right. They weren't even in official what the 3rd Infantry Regiment wears. All right. So there's a combination there. There already weren't regulation. And then 2, they weren't your 3rd Infantry Regiment. They were moving around. We don't do that at all, especially in an event like that. You won't be moving like that. It don't matter how cold it is, snowing, raining, sleet. You will look just like the soldier at the unknown soldier grave. You're going to be prim, proper, in regulation. All right. They showed them moving around. There wasn't a commissioned officer present. So you can look at their sleeves and you could tell there was not an officer there. All right. That's an Army regulation 600-25, 2-3 cannon salutes. There's to be a commissioned officer present at every cannon salute. There wasn't that. And then 3 cannons at Arlington. It's never been shown before on TV. The cannons at Arlington have never been shown, even though they've only shown Arlington all the way back to, I think, just George Bush. I don't even think they showed Arlington with the wreath laying with Bill, but George Bush Jr. So if there's one out there, Bill, I haven't found it and back. But there are 4 cannons all the way back to Nixon. You can see the 4 cannons at the National Capital Region. So it's the first time in history they showed 2 different sets of cannons, but then the first time they've ever shown cannons at Arlington. You've always just seen the wreath laying and that point. So the cannons are always at Arlington for Arlington events, Arlington Cemetery, the funeral, but they've never shown it on January the 20th. So that was your key, but they made people think that was quote unquote Joe's 21 gun salute. It wasn't. That's when your Arlington National Cemetery.mil comes in. It tells you 2 senses. It said the 3 volley salute seen or heard at Arlington is not to be confused with 21 gun salute. The 3 volley salute is a military funeral honors. Well, yes, the cannons are always at Arlington for military funerals, but that's what they showed that day. They displayed for quote unquote Joe. And that's not a 21 gun salute, ladies and gentlemen. So that's how you just derive that they showed there was a funeral for not just Joe, but it was a funeral for the monarchy. That's the bigger picture. The monarchy's dead. And the real kings, they are the ones that acted like kings. They're all talking about President Trump being a king. They're the ones who acted and treated like kings because why? So you go back to what? When they put term limits on the president, but not themselves. The congressmen and women have been the kings and queens because they've stayed in power for 20, 30, 40 years, some of them 50. So that funeral service was a timestamp proclamation of the monarchy dead, Joe Biden ain't real, what you're about to witness. So it was a bunch of layers there that you could just, putting an order there. But that's just straight up regulations and customs. And then also there's people out there on the flip side that think that, oh, well, why would they disgrace the military like that? I'm not. They're not. That's not a disgrace. When you know that this is a strategic operation special, that's just validity for all of us doing what we're supposed to be doing, where we've been put back. That, hey, it's validity for us to our family and friends that, hey, it ain't me being right, be right. This is a strategic special operation that we're running for your good and for the flippage of the corruption you've seen. It's the draining of the swamp that you chanted. Republicans especially chanted that. So it's what you wanted. You claimed you wanted it. So that's what we're doing for you. So that's just validation for us to be able, hey, well, if you're going to argue with straight up Army regulations and Army customs, then you're disgracing the Army first. And you're disgracing every man and woman who died for it second or first, maybe a tie for first there. Long before it gets to me. So that was a straight up, that's the best visual you can show people. And that's what I would do on radio 2 years ago was, I had 3 minutes on radio. So that's what I'd hit them with. And go, well, if you don't believe this, then blah, 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 blah. Go check out this Army regulations, baby. Can't argue with it.
Yeah. But the fact that you came out and explained it, like, okay, so at the time, obviously I'm not a military person. I don't know these things. And I think a lot of us that were, well, first of all, there's the psychology of where everybody's mind was, right? Because people were like dumbfounded, angry, upset, fearful, worried, sad, all these emotions over the election results, right? So everybody kind of got stuck in that. And then you have now the next couple of months, we had craziness going on social media, getting banned, President Trump getting thrown off, like all these other things they distracted us with. And then by the time the inauguration happened, I think a lot of people were starting to realize something wasn't right, or they were learning from, truthers, whatever, but they couldn't quite understand it. The only thing that really stood out like a slap across the face to me was when the motorcade was going and the military were turning their back. Like I couldn't comprehend that. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, like, are they mad? Like I didn't tie it to, to the fact that he was fake yet, even though it didn't make sense. And now we joke, like Stu and I joke all the time when we look at some of the operations and we're like, oh my gosh, like it's so obvious. This is like the way that was so obvious to you. We're like, when these people are writing, the script for this, I can imagine like the conversation, like one person saying to the other, oh, come on, you can't do that. That's so obvious. Like, but then nobody gets it.
No. Well, and that's a straight up regulation. I mean, and customs. I mean, I remember walking on base one time at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and me and my buddy were walking, and we saw the little black van coming, and it has 2 little flags on the front, and I'm like, hey, wait, attention. It was a commander, and he hit us, So when he rendered, we were free to go. We could, But if he wouldn't have seen us, you stand there until that is peripherally out of your vision, right? And then you can render and go about your way. Because if he's out of sight like that, then he'll either assume that you saluted, like if he wasn't paying attention and looking, because they may be in conversation when they're rolling. And if he don't see you, then he'll know that you're already out of sight and assume that you did it, right? But if he's paying attention and you're not paying attention, you don't do that, you'll see what we witnessed. We're walking across base. We did that, but we had seen these other soldiers across on the other sidewalk, and they didn't. They weren't paying attention at all. And lock brakes. When you lock a brake and you squill in the tires, that's what you heard. Well, so most of the time when there's a commander in the front, then like a sergeant major is in the back, either a sergeant major or a command sergeant major. It depends who it is sitting in the commander seat. But it ain't the commander getting out. It's going to be that sergeant major.
Yeah.
That back door flung open, and that command, this or command or sergeant major, I don't know. We couldn't see the rank, but just would have to assume it was a sergeant major. Hopped out, and he looked like he was. I mean, he looked massive. He ran up to those two soldiers, got in their face, and their attention, and you could just hear the expletives across the street, just letting them have it. About paying attention, pay attention to detail. What the F are you doing? I mean, you could hear everything, right? And we're over there just giggling because we're like, yeah, that's why you keep your head on a swivel. And that's what the military talks about. It's discipline, structure. There's that. There's your regiment. But then you keep your head on a swivel and you pay attention to details. You're supposed to always walk around. You know, when an officer passes you on the sidewalk, every officer that passes you, if you're not an officer yourself, every officer, morning, ma'am, afternoon, ma'am, morning, sir, afternoon, sir, evening, ma'am, evening, sir. But you do that, and they're quick too. So it is a morning, ma'am. They'll go, morning. They'll render, and then you can render, right? So everything has its. So go to your Arlington National Cemetery wreath laying ceremonies. All right, every one of them. And I've just showed this recently when they showed quote unquote Joe and then President Trump and Vance this time around. They'll go attention, or they'll do present arms, right? Well, go watch President Trump. Now, you don't have to be in the right timing because they're not doing that on a daily basis. So they don't have to render all at the same time. It's just when they render it. Present arms. Go watch quote unquote Joe and them. Present arms. They're not doing it when they're not on command, right? Yeah. Order arms. They'll be taking their arms down before it even says order sometimes. Watch President Trump and JD Vance and crew. Order. So it'll be order arms. So it's little details that matter. That's what military does. In the military, when you're going through the gas chamber, they put 230 of you in a room 2 weeks before, and you're practicing. You got a little thing on your side. That's your mask. It's a little belt. By the time you're done, after 2 weeks before you even go in the gas chamber, by the time you're done with your training, every man and woman can take that mask out at the same time, put it on, tie the sit straps clear, unclear, clear, and simultaneous. No one will be a hair second late. Everybody, no matter how long your arm is, every man and woman, they'll give you a command. You reach in your pocket, that quick, 5 seconds, under 5 seconds. Every man and woman is in unison with each other. That is how a regiment, that's how much we practice and how much we train. That's just how much. Yeah. So that's why every man and woman, no matter how tall, short, every man and woman is in unison with each other in the military. And that's why it does matter, because it matters there first. And so that's why when you see it like that, you're like, no. Because they all saying your ass is grass, if I could be slain, that if you weren't doing something like that, you wouldn't see it, but off the camera, that'd have been some, ooh, boy. Because you like, if you were my commander, one of you, whatever, both of it, it's a reflection of everything's a reflection of the chain down, the chain of command and the rank down. Everything down here, especially the younger soldiers, are a reflection of your leaders, right? And again, most leaders in the military, not all, but there's a lot who, on that level especially, you're going to reflect good on me, big dog, or we're going to courts-martial you and get you out of this man's military, as the saying is.
Yeah. You know what, Derek? I don't think I'd watched a 21-gun salute until I heard you discussing all this. And then I did, obviously, YouTube and other places, and the wreath laying ceremonies and stuff as well. And the absolute military precision that I was watching is, all standing there and stopwatch, far, like that. It is it is practiced and practiced and practiced. You don't get things wrong. They've even got a cannon if you do misfire, and they fire that so quick, you know.
Oh, you won't even know it.
Was that a misfire? I had to keep going back and watch, you know. And so when you see these things that are so sloppy and obviously wrong, they're the clues to let us know what you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's just taking pride in your job too. You know, that's what we're going back to earlier. That if you're going in the military, that's what you're going in for. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you right now, you're gonna adapt to the military. It's not gonna adapt to you. You adapt to it, and it's your A game every day. You're waking up and you're doing regiment every day. It's not what you want to do. You're not gonna have a lazy day. Oh, I don't feel like getting up. I don't feel like. No, you every day is that same thing, and it's out of your control. If you're single, let's say you're a specialist, you're single, all right, but let's say you're 40 years old. Let's say you went in late. Guess what? Specialist, single, which means you're not living in housing. Guess what? They're going to inspect your room. When you need to go to the bathroom, you're going to have to do what? Ask. I mean, it's that regiment.
Yeah.
And everything works on that chain down. And so like, and then when you're doing a urine test, you're gonna have someone standing in there with you. You'd be like, man, can you turn your head? No, I gotta watch.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Because people are not even honest anymore. They'll cheat, right? They'll cheat on their urine test, just like other things in life. So it's like they're gonna watch, and so you know your privacy. You don't have privacy in the military. Right. So,
yeah.
And so that's why I tell people like it's a whole other life. But you better be glad that it is and be proud that it is. So,
well, I think we're all very thankful for us non-military people are very thankful for what we've seen and witnessed and what is going on behind the scenes with everyone involved in this massive operation. And we're going to win. Is just when. Or already have one, but publicly, I mean, the reveal and stuff. So that's amazing. You got anything else to ask, Elisa?
No, this has just been fantastic. And again, we can't thank you enough because you have been the voice, you know, of teaching everyone and getting us to think and understand military law and what things mean. And we should know that, you know, we're Americans. We should know what all this stuff, that every little detail has a meaning and we should know what that is. Now, I think we're also going to be seeing you hopefully in New York in April.
oh yeah, I'll be up there. That's what I've been told.
Yeah. So that's April 25th and 26th. And Stu and I are going to be the masters of ceremony. I think it's going to be a really great event. One of the kind of tenets of what we're trying to do at this event is to really bring in the strong men. There's going to be a lot of men, patriots, people like yourself, to be there and to be not only an educational aspect, but an example to a lot of the other men to realize they need to step up and they need to step into their power. So we'll be talking more about, you know, the specifics, but it's going to be exciting. And, you know, New York is an absolutely like awful place, just because of all the corruption and so much more that's gone on here. But I can assure you there are a lot of patriots here. Many of us have been afraid, you know, just our own safety throughout the years to proclaim how we feel. But I think that tide is changing a little bit, you know, and people are starting, you know, there's a lot of trauma, you know, going all the way back to the Obama years. And worrying if you were safe or you were going to, for what you said or the hat you wore or whatever. And so I think that tide is changing. And I think it's time that we start to have these events in New York, which, you know, haven't really existed.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing. Well, just one quick question, Derek. I know you haven't got a crystal ball or anything like that, but what do you see coming in the future? You got any predictions? No date fagging, obviously. We've all known much better than that.
Well, I mean, with what they're just now presenting to the people, it's like Lieutenant Colonel Bosey, some of the colonels and people I'm on with, it's like they're just now showing people that, so that it's basically 3 and 5, 6 months, 3 to 5, 6 years behind in a good way, because that's what special operations does. So what they're showing people right now with the War Powers Resolution, that is military and legislative. So all this, he can't do this and he can't do that. It's just a build up. So the calm before the storm, the also looking like he's going to lose kind of deal. A lot of people jump ship with President Trump.
Yeah.
And that's some of it strategic by design because of the influencers that are. But then there's some of it that straight up they just are fatigued, I guess would be the right terms. But I still think that's designed in another way because it's still the commanders knowing that they know people are going to be doing this. So, and it's not that they're trying to play on emotions, but it's still trying to get people to be resilient, which is what I would tell males, what I'll tell them in April. You got to be resilient. When you feel like you're at your lowest level, fatigue, whatever it is, that's when you really find out what you're made of. And it's all attitude. It's all mind over matter. I remember being in negative 30 degrees and if you'd have told me outside of the military, hey, you're going to be in negative 30 one day, I'm like, no, I'm not, because I'm your typical Southern boy. And I'm like, I don't like anything under 40, just unless I have to, so, resilience. And I made it through many, many, many days with hardly any clothes on in that kind of weather. And you learn to condition your mind and you strengthen those critical and strategic thinking. So where we're rolling, everything's already been done. It's just a matter of okay, are the people going to be ready for that? I think people are. I think people are tired and fatigued enough that it's time to do that. Yeah. But President Trump, you just got to look. He's not posting a lot. What he is posting are things like today he posted about the Marjorie Taylor Greene thing. Yeah. But it still ties into your mainstream media. He's hammering the network still. So a lot of that restricting telecommunications, and then the all roads lead to Obama. He hasn't said much still. He let that hang loose about August, September, and then he's kind of backed away. So I don't know, now Lieutenant Colonel Bosey and the colonels, the last time we were on just a couple weeks ago, said that you'll start seeing some arrest and certain things. And President Trump fired 8 judges last week that no one seems to be talking about. Now they're not your higher level, but they're still, I think they were district court, 8 judges. So, you're watching that clean out. This is the judicial branch resetting. Everything is judge this, judge that, judge this, judge that. So I think there'll be a lot more of that. But, when is the big whatever? I don't know, yeah. But if I did know, I probably wouldn't be able to tell it. Honestly. And I wouldn't even be able to beat around the bush around it because it's hard to beat around those kind of, that territory. But all I can say is when you have a general like General Paul Vallely, I know people that get tripped up over thinking, well, how can one person know so much? Well, we wouldn't have a recording of a Moses if all those people in the wilderness would have known how to get out of that wilderness. Now, would we? All right. So, General Paul Vallely is just one, but General McInerney, there's a couple out there that have been more freely talking than others because they can and they want to is the other thing. But when you have someone like General Paul Vallely, even though the topic is not what you're wanting to know about for people, when a man like that in April tells you, hey, I gave President Trump a 2 plans, all right, in offense, defense, and you haven't seen any of the offense yet, you haven't even heard about it in the media, and he tells you this on a podcast like ours, then you all of a sudden hear it in the mainstream media that, oh, we got special operators down in Mexico, and they're going to decimate the cartel, special operations, right? And he says this in April, and then all of a sudden it hits the news 8 months later, 7 months later. Like I tell people, he didn't make it to a general for nothing. And generals, when President Trump shows the visuals of the generals and the admirals, now he's not an active general, but it doesn't matter. When you make it to general status, they all collectively still have gone to Washington, D.C. at least twice a year. Whether the presidents have adhered to their advice or not, that's another story. But they're still very much active, very much. It was General Paul Vallely who set up the meeting with President Trump and Putin in Helsinki, Finland. All right. And these will be all accounted for in the history books for those men at that stature. And so, I know people get tripped up on that, but you got to also keep in mind that one general has a division under him. That division can have up to 75,000 soldiers, give or take. So it's a lot more than just hearing one general. So when you hear a full bird colonel like Colonel Sellers that forwarded my books, he's a former deputy commander of Delta Force. All right. Colonels also know generals because some of their colonel buddies stayed in and ranked up. All right. So a lot of them are interconnected. Lieutenant colonels, same thing. They may have gotten out as lieutenant colonel. They have buddies that stayed in, made it to general. So that's how big it is to still hear all special operations, lieutenant colonels and colonels talk because they all have buddies that stayed in and are generals. So guess what? They talk.
Yes.
They also know what's going on. So, we're not loosely talking. And I say we, I don't put myself in their categories because of their stature. But we all do know the strategy, the plan, and we don't loosely talk about things. And it's not opinion, as was my earlier. But how can we know? Well, it's just because we do know, so it's kind of like that.
It was General Vallely, wasn't it, that we all watched a video about 3-4 years ago, about 4 years ago, I think, where he was talking about the legitimacy of the Q operation and stuff, and that he sort of really fired everyone up. I always remember that. I haven't got it queued up, unfortunately, otherwise I'll play it at the end today, but I shall go and dig that out. Yeah.
Well, and like I try to tell people, Q is a clearance as well. So it's like I tell people, you can be a good researcher, but you weren't the one putting it out. So that's why I always tell people is that, that Q is a clearance. I know people with Q clearance, and they're very, very, very strategic, critical, brilliant men and women, and whole other level of brilliant. And so, everybody has a place and a part, but Q is a clearance. So people have to always keep that in mind first, and then realize that this was never going to be a very strategic combat game. It wasn't. The combat was going to be decimating the cartels and taking out the tunnels, rescuing the children, that kind, whole different kind of what people have been conditioned to think of as combat. It's not that. The main combatives were going to be this time around a new kind of combat, which is the mind. And the recent article on military.com proves this. It's Fort Bragg, psychological warfare. The video they put out, We Are Everywhere. And it's all about psychology. And what do they put in there? They put the Ghost Army logo, and they put also what? Pepe the Frog. So, so if you're a patriot out there and you've already been on, there you go. That's a validation of that. What you know. And also you go to your friends and family and say, hey, you call me crazy, but I got validated again today. And no matter what they call you, smile and just know that and they don't. And you can have whatever relationship you have with people. You can be if it's the one who's like, oh, well, cuss me all you want, but you're gonna come back to me or whatever. So it's all relationship based and it's all personality based. But It's the validation is going to be there when you have a legend, when you have laws and orders that outline that. And so that was the validity, though. That was a big one for people. That if they saw that article that I posted from military.com. And see, that's also military.com is for all of our veterans, that a lot of veterans, they say a lot, but some don't know what's going on. So that's also for those veterans that may have heard someone like me, who's their counterpart, talk about it, and they say, oh, I don't believe that. That's hogwash. Well, when they saw that on military.com, which is a mainstream military, see, if they read that, they're going, oh, man, that's what my buddy was talking about. And I called him crazy. Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's funny you say that, because I was at one of the events and we were joking, saying how people think we're crazy. And I said to someone, I said, well, we may be crazy, but that doesn't mean we're wrong.
Yeah.
I just said that to a buddy. I literally just had this conversation where I said that. I said, because I typed that out. I have that drafted and saved. I said, just because I'm crazy don't mean I'm wrong.
Exactly.
But it's even worse when you're actually, got the badge and authenticated and all that. It's even worse because you're just like, what else I got to show you?
Right.
I didn't get this badge in 2017. I didn't get it. It's like they brought me in at this point. I got an opportunity. I took it. It should be even more that, hey, I wasn't here back here. They put me in here, so you would think, but it still goes back to people. They got to want to.
Yeah. And
you can't make people want to. And no matter how much you push them and shake them, you could hang them over a cliff, and if they don't want to, they're it's negated, right? But there's some people out there. There's some who are instigators, and they'll rile you up and make you think they're not, but they are. They're listening. I know some like that. Oh, they'll agitate the heck out of you, but they're listening. And then there's Barney Fifes in the world. If you've ever, watched Andy Griffith, Andy would do what I was saying earlier. He knew he was right all along, but it wasn't about him being right. So he had a way of getting Barney to make Barney think that Barney caught the criminal or the thief, and let him feel that way.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, it was about catching a thief. It wasn't about being correct. It was just about getting the thief or the crook out of the picture. And so a lot of times he would make Barney think that Barney thought of the whole strategy and everything, and walked away knowing that, well, at the end of the day, my life is about living a whole productive life for myself and who I believe is my maker, spiritual, And so it's always a great to pull up Andy Griffith in the Barney situation, because that's what he did a lot of times. And Barney would go, and he thought it.
Yeah.
And Andy's going, yeah, go get it. So, and then a lot of times too, Andy would make the criminal get in a position he put him there, but Barney thought that he put him there.
Yes.
So, and that's what military, this whole thing is that, well, I know that Joe Biden wasn't real. I know he wasn't president, but for the people who just can't get past that, then, well, here's something you're going to have to get past: the principle and the integrity of the laws and the orders. And why would Joe do this if President Trump is, and if President Trump was one of them, it wouldn't look this chaotic, and there wouldn't be that many people on this side losing their minds if President Trump was one of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Perfect.
So.
Well, great way to end this. And again, thank you so much. Again, it's the Awakening Summit in New York, April 25th and 26th. There'll be more information on that. Save the date, and we'll let you know more information as time goes on. And Derek, thank you so much for being here. As always, you just enlighten and educate, and we thank you.
Yeah, from a non-military man to a military man, thank you for your service and everything you're doing.
Well, it's an honor to do so, and appreciate being here, and thank you for having me. See you in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Look forward to it. Well, I've just put a little video from Italy QAnons on the end of this 2-minute military video. So thank you, Derek. Have a brilliant rest of your day.
Yes. God bless.
Thanks everyone for watching.
Twice, I guarantee that they don't have a clue what I think like. I might come across like a rebel, I see life out of the box, don't put me in it. I might start a revolution, break out of it, rewrite the history that you made and take it to new heights. Every loss is a lesson, that's why I never lose fights. And I learn from my mistakes and I